So the Dark Tower series from Stephen King has had a troubled production history, to say the least, when it comes to television and film adaptations. Because the original film that came out, I say the original film, I think it's the only version of the film that ever came out, was a few years ago with Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba and some other characters. It didn't do well. It didn't do as well as anyone wanted it to do. And I remember when the news came out about that, it was coming out that we're going to do this movie, then they were going to have a series that was going to revolve around it, and it was going to be this big thing. The movie didn't do very well, and all those plans fell apart. And it appears that now that the dust has settled and a couple of years have passed, a few years have passed, Mike Flanagan has picked up the rights to the Dark Tower series and is promoting a similar take on things. Now, I'm I'm genuinely curious because I tell you what, Mike Flanagan produces some amazing television. Even though some of his shows have gotten canceled, that's just television. It is what it is. If you have not watched Midnight Mass, that is one of the coolest shows that I have seen in a long, long time, and it had a great, sort of it was like a horror show, but also it had a really interesting sort of like religious element to it, and a different spin, a different take on vampires, which was a unique take that I hadn't ever seen before because they tied it into Catholicism. And I really just, I know it was very sacrilegious for a lot of people who viewed it as, just can't watch it because this is just sacrilege. But for me, it was brilliant because I don't have those religious ties. So it was like, this is great. This is great storytelling. So Flanagan has already dipped his fingers and toes into the Stephen King world before. He's already directed two feature film King adaptations, namely Doctor Sleep and Gerald's Game. And it says here in this article, this is over at Tor.com, by the way, it says his connection to King means that Flanagan has talked to the writer about the adaptation. And as he told Deadline, this happened because I sent Stephen King a very detailed outline of what I wanted to do with it. And in response to that, he gave us the rights. So, notefully, that the rights had apparently reverted back to Stephen King after everything fell apart a few years ago. So here's where I kind of lose the plot with Flanagan because this is what they tried to do before, where he says he envisions the adaptation as at least 5 seasons that would be followed by 2 movies, and that's what was they had tried to do that before, and it didn't work out for them. So this is very interesting to me. But what is, I think, more importantly, is that they're at least working on a pilot script. He says the first scene would be a black screen and the words, "The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed," which would come up in silence and you'd hear the wind and we'd gradually fade up to this Lawrence of Arabia-esque landscape with a silhouette in the distance just making his way across the hard pan, and we would build it up from there in order to the end. He tells Deadline he has a pilot script he's very thrilled with and a very detailed outline for the first season and a broader outline for the subsequent seasons. Dun, 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 dun. So his most recent series, it says Midnight Club, was canceled after its first season. He has one more Netflix project coming, the Poe adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher, and Lock Picture in all episodes, which it suggests his slate may be somewhat clear for him to focus on Dark Tower. There's no word on a platform or anything. Yes, I wonder I don't know that this would be a Netflix thing because he may have sort of wrapped up with Netflix, considering he's had a couple of successes, but then he's gotten some cancellations as well. So it remains to be seen what's going to be happening there. But I think this is one of those things where I'm genuinely curious about what he's going to do because in his last few projects have all been sort of horror related. And if you've ever read the Dark Tower trilogy from Stephen King, it's not really a horror tale. Yes, you have, the dark bad guy, um, the Man in Black, and but it's not really as horrific or as scary as some of his other works. This was actually one of the tamer Stephen King series, in terms of it's sort of like it's a fantasy series with elements of science fiction, but it's got lots of different worlds. There's like the King Arthur legends, all the Arthurian tales and the weapons, what they're made from, and the history of the rulers and everything else. So I think for me, one of the reasons I liked The Dark Tower so much was because of the world building that had gone into it. But it's also a very difficult book series to read because I've mentioned this, and I think I did in the episode that I did on George Lucas versus J.R.R. Tolkien, and I was talking about um, authors who come back and retcon their previous works over the course of like 30 or 40 years. That's the Dark Tower trilogy, Dark Tower series, not trilogy, but the Dark Tower series. Because Stephen King first started working on this, and then it took him 30 years to work on it in its totality. And he went back and retconned some things and was constantly tweaking until he got it all the way to the finish line. So, and Stephen King, by the way, is well known for being involved in all of the adaptations of his works to the point where he's more than happy to go in and make additional tweaks to the show and film adaptations to update them for that medium, and that has sometimes not always worked out to the happiness of the fans because like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. And it's like, well, he's the creator. So that's why for me, I like the fact that it sounds like Flanagan wrote a very specific, tailored pitch to Stephen King and said, "Look, man, this is what I'd love to do." And given his penchant for horror, I wonder if we might be getting a darker version of the Dark Tower series because the film that was with Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba was, man, dare I say it, it was sort of a generic trope movie. Like they tried really hard to make it like a superhero film, I feel, and it just didn't work. Like it was missing all of the elements. And also because they tried to condense the story down into this like 1.5 hour runtime. I don't remember if that was actually the case, but it was a short runtime and they tried to fit all of this stuff into this. It just doesn't work. Like the story of the Dark Tower series needs to be a series format. It doesn't work in a film format. So I'm kind of curious why he's saying that his the envisions the series is at least 5 seasons that would be followed by 2 movies. But why would you need movies when you could just do it as series? Just have a 5 series run. I don't know why you need to have 2 movies after the series. Like just do the series. You get more bang for your buck. And these days, with the budgets that you can get, as long as you're producing it for a prestige network, like if you're doing it for HBO, they might give you $10 million, $15 million an episode. And if you're getting $10 million and you do 10 episodes, you can get $100 million. That's a good chunk of change to produce something of pretty decent quality. So I mean, considering you can get a lot of these indie films come out for 80, $90 million, you should be able to produce 10 episodes of television for that as well. So I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. I really like his past projects. Now, I've not watched everything that Flanagan does. Like, I haven't seen where is it here? The Haunting of Hill House. I haven't seen that. I haven't watched The Haunting of Bly Manor, but I loved Midnight Club. Excuse me, the Midnight Mass. And I just think that this is an interesting thing that I wanted to share with everybody. Let me know your thoughts below. What do you think about Mike Flanagan's work? That's more important to me because I've loved some of the things I've seen. I think he's an interesting filmmaker, and it could be a really dark take on the Dark Tower, which sounds silly now that I repeat that 5 times fast. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, support if you can, super chats and super stickers and super thanks and memberships and Patreon page. See you next time.